Hello everybody, welcome to Therapist Take, and we're going to talk about the question, is having sleepovers okay for parents to allow their kids to do? So don't go anywhere, we're going to talk about that right next. Okay, we're back, and I'm here with my guest host, Mollie Hobbs, and we're going to tackle this issue that seems to have become a thing again in our culture. We got phones ringing somewhere, but it's all right. As long as it's playing, it's fine. Did it freeze us up? No. Oh, okay. So, anyways, apologize for that interruption. But we're going to talk about this particular issue that seems to have come up again in our culture, which is should or shouldn't parents allow their kids to have sleepovers? And so I have with me our guest today who's filling in for Carrie Kyger, who couldn't be here today, and Mollie Hobbs. And so would you mind telling us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a marriage and family therapist candidate. I work with young kiddos, teens, and their families. And yeah, I do a lot of play-based therapies, but yeah, I do a lot of work just with families in general and talking to parents and wearing their parent hats, their mom roles, their dad roles, and any obstacles they come through. And this has been a topic that we've kind of touched upon and talked about before.
Yeah, and it's really easy too to get carried away, like when we do like our little warm up to doing these videos. We'll sit in here and talk a little bit, and then it's really, you can tell a hot topic or something that people have a lot of thoughts on, because we almost had this discussion before this episode aired. And so there's definitely a lot of things that we could probably talk about that we're not going to have time to talk about in 25 or 30 minutes, but we'll do our best.
Yeah.
Right? So
absolutely.
So this came up for me in terms of choosing this topic is because I've just noticed that, it is something that has kind of hit social media again lately, kind of this movement to not let your kids have sleepovers. And I remember that happening a few years ago as well. And so it just kind of struck my interest, and I was like, what a good topic.
And
of
course, in today's age, it was a TikTok trend as of recently that has brought this conversation back up. And we're talking about earlier, it's a big spectrum of parents of where they lie on, do they agree? Is this a good thing for their kiddos? Or no, we have to say no, it's not an option. So yeah, we're going to dive into that today.
Right. And I know that there's a camp of people that probably take a really hardcore stance that nobody should allow their kids to have sleepovers, and there's probably a group of people that think that those people are crazy, and I tend to stay away from the extremes, because I just think most of the time it's not helpful, and it turns people's ears off more than anything else. So what we want to do today is just kind of have a conversation and kind of explore our own minds on kind of thinking critically about this, diplomatically, about the situation. And one thing I noticed when I was watching some of these videos is that most of the people that were putting these videos out, they would say things like, here's why this isn't good for me, or here's why this isn't good for my family. And I think that's an important piece to recognize, which I appreciate that part of it.
Yeah, and part of our conversation today is that, at the end of this video, it's not saying this is what you should do and this is what you definitely should not do, right. But more of that it's a conversation, and it's something, part of just having this video out there today is just sparking that conversation, not only amongst parents, but with your kids as well.
Right.
And, what's the best fit kind of for you? That's the kind of question we want you to leave with today is, what is the best for us, for our family, for
exactly.
you as a parent? Right.
And so hopefully this will get your wheels turning and help you be able to answer some of those questions and make some of those decisions. But let's talk a little bit about what might be some of the reasons people are hesitant to let their kids. So let's talk about some let's start with rational reasons, that these are real concerns, real fears. They're not irrational. What comes to mind to you when you first think of that?
One of the first things that we've been noticing is the first thing is safety. We don't know what kind of is happening at other friends' houses. Are our kids safe? And that in and of itself is a loaded question too. As simple as like, are they going to bed on time? Or are they staying up way too late? To the safety of like. Is there things happening behind closed doors we don't know is happening? And with that too is what is our kids being exposed to,
right? That
we don't know as a parent that is happening. And I think that's where it causes a lot of just nervousness and anxiety for a lot of parents that are saying, no, I'm not going to allow my kids to have sleepovers.
Right. Do you think that, I know this is true for me, but I'm curious for you, because I have 3 kids, and they're not small. I mean, my little one, my third kid, she's the smallest. She's 10 years old, and but they're growing like weeds, like we say all the time. And you have one on the way. But as a therapist, though, one thing that I say a lot is that we see the things that never happen. So. The things that never happen every day for us, in the sense of the stories that we hear. And do you think that as you think about raising your child, that's might shape your or not necessarily shape, but kind of impact your fears in terms of sending your kid out into the world?
Yeah, I mean, and I think on some level it has to be. That's just something that I personally, as a therapist, is more aware of, and so it's definitely going to be in the back of my mind knowing this. But if anything, it's just is a reminder of I need to have conversations with my kiddos. Like I need to, just kind of be aware and know that this is a thing. But like to also know, to your point, like we get those tough cases. We get those things that don't happen often. We get that small percentage, but yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard to say that it wouldn't impact me on things, but just to know that that's I have to be aware of that. Not that I'm going to be scared of it per se, or make that hopefully make that my only decision, but to know that it has to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I know personally for me, like I have let my angst get in the way of certain parenting decisions, and to the point where there are certain areas of life that I just have to turn over and trust, like my wife and other people around me, because I don't think I have the best sense of what is normal in those circumstances. So I'll give you an example. I have to let my wife take care of hiring babysitters. And the reason why is because I've heard many stories in here, more than I ever thought I would, about from grown men who were abused by female babysitters. And I think that we often in our culture we are alarmed by male babysitters, and we more comfortable with a female babysitting our kids, and not thinking that that our kids are in danger from a female, being the babysitter. So when it comes to babysitters, I just I think I just need to let you do the hiring and firing, and I'll just kind of recognize that my fears are getting a little bit irrational in that area, and I just have to kind of take a back seat on that one. So,
and that's something, just to talk about you for a second, just you are aware of that, and that's like kind of step one, and then just like, oh, I didn't realize that was something.
I became aware of it.
You became aware of it. Yep.
Yeah, when it was like I was nixing every babysitter opportunity. No. My wife's like, look, we're gonna have to take a risk, and a calculated risk, and reach out for some help.
Yes.
And I think that's hard to do for most parents anyways, because your babies are your babies, right? But I think it might be particularly harder for people who are in these helping professions that who experience, especially like you work with kids, and
Yes.
so it's likely that as your career develops and you're hearing more and more stories of kids who have gone through certain difficult situations, that I just can't imagine it not impacting you, or any of us are in those professions. But I go that route to say too that you don't have to be in a helping profession to have your angst get in the way, or reach that level of of being irrational. Maybe you could have gone through your own stuff to experience some really hard
hard
life
experiences
experiences.
growing up, or even just you've had a bad experience of doing sleepovers when you were young,
Right.
From one scale of just like, oh, it's a new house, a new smell, a new routine of like, oh, I'm very anxious, but after the next day you're like, oh, like it was really fun, but like that was still uncomfortable as kiddos. Like you had to learn through that.
Right.
To more of the extreme, like something really bad happened at a sleepover. And so whatever that is, how that plays into your parent role, your decision on allowing sleepovers for your kiddos.
Right, and I think that's another important thing to bring up is that I think most people's minds when they think of, I mean that's anecdotal. I don't know if that's if that's research or not what I'm about to say, but it seems to me anyways that most people's minds tend to gravitate toward like fears of sexual abuse, sexual assault. And I think that is a conversation, as you said, to have with your kids about appropriate touching, appropriate just interaction with based upon the age of whoever you're interacting with. Like, in other words, if there's older kids in the house and things like that. And I think that's a rational concern. The conversation needs to happen. But one thing I wanted to make sure to say is that bad experiences at sleepovers don't just take the form of sexual abuse. Like, they come in a lot of different forms. And so I don't know if you've ever read or familiar with Sarah Silverman's writings and stuff, but she has a really good autobiography that I read, and she has a very traumatic sleepover story. That is not sexual at all. It has to do with bedwetting, which is the name of her book, or part of the name of her book. It has bedwetting in it, and it was it just she makes light of it because she's a comedian, but it's just a terrible story. Makes me really. I was really kind of angry a little bit, that happened to her, but all that to say is that sexual assault is not the only bad experience people have at sleepovers.
Yeah, and as I kind of mentioned before, a lot of the angst of parenting is like not of allowing your kids to go to sleepovers is not knowing what's happening, and one of them we can talk about of just like technology right now and social media and what kids have access to, and what might they be looking at. Like, you may be very confident in your kiddo that you have all the parental controls on your iPad that you have that they have at home, but what about their friend's iPad? Do they know what sites to go to, what sites not to go to? And then I think it comes back full circle of the conversation you need to have with your kids of why it's important to let an adult know if you see something you're not supposed to see, and how to recognize that. As much as it's easy just to, as a parent, just like, oh, the parental controls are on, don't need to worry about it, we still need to have those conversations with our kiddos and know that exists, and that if they see something they're not supposed to see, how do they let an adult know?
Right. One thing I like that you're saying too is you keep throwing the word out, conversation. What I'm not hearing Molly say is that you need to have the talk. I've always kind of been like, I almost think sometimes it'd be better for parents not to say anything at all than to just have one talk and then not talk about it again. Seems like that would, really drill the shame in much more. But she's saying a conversation, which means
a continuous. A continuous. It's not just this one time. Yeah. We're gonna sit you down, tell you about all the things kids aren't supposed to do, but like checking in with your child, checking in and knowing, seeing what they know, seeing what they've have experienced. And, you know, we've kind of talked about this off camera, but, you know, it doesn't just stop at sleepovers. Like, this is not just the place where all this bad things can happen and this exploring of the internet, or, you know, it's just another environment, you know, we're allowing our kiddos to be in. Like, these things that we're really scared of can happen in our, you know, middle school hallways. So I think part of what we want, you know, parents to know is, like, especially going back to this conversation, this is something that should be having, and this is just a new environment that they're in.
Yeah, and I think it's something for any parents watching this, that when you a lot of people might think of these conversations and feel a little squeamish, you know, and that's just shame kind of talking. And the thing to remember is that your kids don't feel that shame. I mean, if you catch them young, if you're starting young with your kids and having these conversations, they don't feel that shame. And what we do is we transfer it over to them, you know, on when we start talking about, you know, genitalia or inappropriate touch and things like that. And then there might be certain words that we're like, you know, we make facial expressions, and they start understanding, like, this is dirty, you know, we're not supposed to talk about this, you know. And so if you can really work at tackling your own shame with it and realize that they're not embarrassed when they're young, if you catch them young enough, they're not embarrassed, you know, and just start having an open conversation with them about some of these things. And that conversation needs to be age appropriate, you know, so kind of know the developmental stage of your kid, and kind of start introducing, you'll introduce new things as they grow and develop, as you should. And that's a conversation hopefully they will carry on with their children if they choose to have kids someday.
Yeah, and I mean, for a lot of the kids that I work with, a lot of the teens, no matter what they're coming into therapy with, we'll always start to have a conversation of just, like, body boundaries. You know, what do they know? And, you know, it's a lot of them haven't had that conversation. Right. So, you know, sometimes start of therapy is that's when we're starting to talk about it. And I really encourage my parents to get involved. It's not, you know, me teaching your kiddos. Like, how can I help you as a parent have those conversations and feel good about, I'm not going to, you know, ruin them if I have this conversation. Right. Like, I'm not going to hurt them if I have it. Like, it's actually very beneficial. Yeah. You know, you want to have your kiddos to tell the difference and let you know.
So I think that if you guys aren't able to tell, we don't have a stance, you know, for or against it, you know, sleepovers. I mean, it's really up to parents. I think what's important from our position is that we aren't adamantly against it. Like, we don't think it's like the worst thing a parent could do is let their kids go sleep over at somebody's house. It could be based on certain circumstances. I think it's unique to the child, unique to the family, unique to your life circumstances and situation. I don't think you're necessarily harming your child by not letting them have sleepovers. I don't think that's, I think there could be, like, based upon your kid's personality, like, you have a very social kid and friend, like, there could be some, you know, some anger or resentment that possibly could build in your child based upon, again, what is happening culturally around that child, you know, in terms of their social environment and what is kind of required for them to survive, you know, their middle school, basically. But so if you're kind of wondering, you know, like, well, what position do you guys take? Like, we're not adamantly against it, but we don't necessarily think that it's for everybody either. I think we both agree on that, right?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day is we're just trying to say, like, you know, choose something that's right for you as your personal parenting style, and know each kiddo. And you might have 3 kids, and they're all might need a different need, and one can start having sleepovers at 5th grade, and the other one's like, you know what, I probably 8th or 9th I feel a little bit more comfortable, or one that's, nope, you know, this is not a good one for you. Right.
Yeah. Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, and we want to offer you guys 4 tips for if you decide to allow your child to have a sleepover, we do think that you need to be responsible with it and not just, throw caution to the wind and just say, okay, just go have a sleepover, because I'm okay with sleepovers. I grew up having sleepovers. So you just go and you have fun having a sleepover, and there's, no precautions taken or information gathering or anything like that. So we're going to give you 4 tips for if you're a family that decides you're going to allow your children to have sleepovers. Here are some things to consider. So tip number 1 is to know your child, and basically it was kind of what we were just talking about. Like, how old are they? Is it age appropriate for them to have a sleepover? Where are you sending them? Who's is this a family member? Is this a friend? So kind of knowing like what would be appropriate for your child based upon their developmental level. Yeah. I also think social skills and some other things would come into play there.
And with that as well is, does your, have we had that, again, conversation with kiddos of do you as a parent trust your kiddo to go over to another person's, even a best family friend's house, and do they know how to even call for help if they need it? Do they know how to, I need A, to talk to an adult, or B, call home because I don't feel either comfortable and safe? Like, do I feel like my 5th grader is able to do that? Like, I need to know my kiddo. Like, how do they feel comfortable to take on this fun task of sleeping at someone's house, sleeping at a friend's house?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because, I think back at a time when I was growing up that I never, as far as I can remember, never had any bad experiences at a sleepover, but I do remember my mom not letting me go once because I had started sleepwalking when I was a kid. And so she just felt safer knowing I was in a home versus like she wouldn't let me go to the lake with my friends, like, or I wasn't allowed to go camping for a short period of time. And I didn't get a lot of offers on that anyways, but I remember her specifically saying no to those sleepover opportunities simply because she knew I was sleepwalking a lot and she didn't want me to be out in the woods and walk off. And so it was definitely safety thing. I was upset about it. Looking back on it now, I don't think it was super traumatic for me. I think it was appropriate. I think I'd do the same thing. So she knew me well enough to know that, at this juncture in my kid's life, not a good idea in that setting. And so that's the first one is know your child.
And the tip number 2 that we have for you guys is meet the parents. Know the environment you're sending your kiddos. Is this a family that you guys know very well? And if you don't, maybe you go and you meet the parents. Maybe you just understand like what their routines are, what they're comfortable with, how they like to do sleepovers, And also for this too, it's like that trust in that other family is if something does go wrong or say the kids look up things they're not supposed to, will that parent come and talk to you and tell you? And just having those, just being transparent, like, hey, if there's anything that happens, or even if there's something that's going on that you don't feel comfortable with my kiddo, like, I want that phone call. I want to have a conversation. I want to be able to trust this whole other parent to kind of take care of my kiddo for the night.
Right. My wife and I, when we first had kids, we said there would always be 4 questions that we asked and when we went to meet the parents, before we let our kid, even just sleep over, just go over there to play unsupervised by us. And that is, are there guns in the home? What's the internet situation?
Yes.
And then when it comes to sleepovers, are there, let me back up a little bit, before sleepovers, are there any other children in the house? Because I want to know, like, if I'm sending my small child over there, they're bigger kids. And then if there is a sleepover situation, what are the sleeping arrangements? And of course, if they answer yes to any one of those, I'm asking more questions, to get to put my mind at ease on where I'm sending my child. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do number 3, and we'll try to move a little quicker here. But the third one is to trust your gut. I know that sometimes, like in our situation, like where we experience the things that never happen all the time here, and when you're a therapist, because you're you're living the traumas of people vicariously through them, and so I know that happens sometimes, and our gut might tell us something's off that might not be off, but I think it's just better to err on the side of caution anyways.
Absolutely. And kind of like your personal story before, of like your mom made that decision of, hey, my kiddo is sleepwalking right now. Like, I don't think it's right to do like a camping one, or because you're not safe in that house. And that was your mom trusting her gut. Like, this is a decision I have to make to keep my kiddo safe. And so,
it just didn't feel right. And I worked hard to convince her.
I bet you
did. And she held her
Absolutely.
ground. Yeah, good for her.
Yeah. And then our last kind of final tip here is doing a follow-up with your kiddo, checking in with them after their sleepover, seeing how it goes, and talking about, like, what have you noticed that was different at, their house that was different than our house. Because, I remember going to other kids' houses, and they make meals for dinner that is so different from my parents' meals, and and so like just talking about that and talking about how like even just like the different smells of someone's house is different, but just following up with them and checking in with them and seeing, because that's the conversation and getting used to that. That's when kids will tell you if something has happened that they weren't comfortable with or they felt anxious about, or and identifying that.
And I think it's important to take note that following up with your child is not just done through conversation. It's also done through observation. Especially with the smaller they are, they just don't articulate as well. They don't engage in conversation as well. So you need to be paying attention to what they're doing, if they've learned something new. Is that where did they might have learned that there, whether it was good or bad or neutral, or just any kind of changes of behavior, because if something happens, and sometimes it does, I think we need to acknowledge that sometimes it does. These tips aren't a foolproof way that are guaranteed to prevent your child from not being in harm's way when they're at somebody's house. And so sometimes it does happen, but there are resources available to that. But it's important to not turn a blind eye to something that's alarming to you. So. And we'll make sure in the description of this video, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll put it in the description. On Facebook, we'll just add it to the comments. We'll put some resources in that for you, so that you can find therapists in your area, or if Molly happens to have a good website to go to or something like that, we'll add those, and you can peruse those at your leisure. So. Yeah, but Molly, I appreciate you doing this today. I hope you'll do it again someday.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
It was a blast. So appreciate anybody that was watching this, and hope you benefited from the information that we gave you. So, thanks.
Thank you.